and welcome back to Drivetime Marketing, the show where we help casino marketers turn strategy into action and insights into impact. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that trips even the most seasoned teams up, and that's website analytics. And if you've ever opened Google Analytics, stared at the dashboard, and wondered, now what? This episode is going to definitely be for you. My guest today is Philippa Gamse, a digital strategy consultant and author who just spent decades helping small businesses and, yes, even casinos make smarter decisions online. She's here to help us cut through the noise of vanity metrics, one of my least favorite things, and focus on what really matters and how to use your website to drive business and not just traffic. So whether you're trying to get more value out of a small marketing team, track the ROI of your digital campaigns, or finally understand what your web visitors are really doing, this episode is going to give you the clarity you've been looking for. So before we get into it, Philippa, please tell our audience something about yourself. Where are you? What are you doing? What did you done?
Yes, good morning. So yes, I'm Philippa. I'm actually obviously a Brit initially. That's why I'm called Philippa, because Americans don't typically get called Philippa. They get called Philip, actually, but not Philippa. And I've been in the US for actually quite a long time. I currently live in Santa Cruz, California. And, you know, I have this thing about analytics because I honestly believe that without analytics, you're just flying blind with what you're doing with your websites, because you really don't have any idea what's going on. And I know that, as you said in the introduction, people can find the analytics extremely overwhelming,
Yes.
Confusing, and they only get more so as the capabilities of what they can do increase. So my goal, and we were just chatting before we started about my new book, which just came out. My goal is to demystify that for business owners and decision makers, not to expect you to actually do the analytics yourself if you don't want to, but to understand what they can do for you, what you can know, what you should know, and how to choose and talk to an analyst.
So let's start with, what do casino marketers get wrong about their website metrics?
Well, you know, I would probably imagine that most casino marketers are generally like the rest of us. And there are lots of things that people just don't really think about in terms of their analytics. And you know, checking out some casino websites yesterday, and I think this probably applies as well, because the thing is, what you've got to do is to figure out what you really need to know and what's going to help you. There's no point in just looking at a load of numbers for the sake of it. So what you're looking for is things that you can solve for, as we say, so that things that you can do something about. But you're also looking for common things, as you just said, that sort of catch you up. So, for example, here's a very simple example that I just see again and again and again on websites. So we are typically making pages longer and longer. And that's often because of mobile, right? Because it's easier to sort of scroll down than it is to keep going back to the menu and clicking on something.
Yeah.
And that's fine as long as people scroll. And a lot of people don't. So if you're not engaging that visitor with whatever's coming up on the screen, they're not going to scroll down to it. Now, in the US, a lot of people you mentioned and in the world, a lot of people use Google Analytics, right? Out of the box, Google Analytics will tell you when somebody's got 90% of the way down the page. But 90% of the way down a long page is a lot. So if you have somebody to help you, or if you know how to do this, you can customize it. And that's one of the things I love about Google Analytics. It's very, very customizable, so that you can choose how often it tells you that somebody scrolled. So for example, I usually set mine for clients at 25, 50, 75, 90%. Now you can see typically how far down a long page visitors get. Now that means that you know what of your content people aren't seeing, because if something really important is a long way down the page and people don't see it, obviously they're not going to know about it. Now you can do something about that. So I said, you know, you shouldn't measure anything you can't do something about. So you can either move that content up You can move your calls to action. You can add calls to action, right? You can tell them something's coming up that you should know about. You can figure out what to do. But the point is, you've got the information now to know that you need to do something, because people are missing out on important offers.
I used to set my scroll depth, because I have a blog, to 50%. Now that my blogs have gotten longer, I've actually should adjust them probably to 25%, because getting to 50 is going to be almost like reading the whole thing a couple of years ago.
But that's what I'm saying. You
Yeah.
don't have to have only one measure. That's what I'm saying. I typically set for clients for 4 events. So 25, 50, 75, and 90, because that way you can see the spread. Oh, so 75% of my visitors get to 50%, but then this is when they start dropping off, right? So you have a little more granular detail about that.
So I think that for casinos, the page that's probably the longest for them is going to be their promotions page, because they'll list their promotions, what's happening on the 1st, what's happening on the 2nd, what's happening every Monday, and so on and so forth. And they put them in calendar order, right? And so if somebody isn't scrolling, they might miss those events that are happening at the end of the month that are just as important as the ones that were happening at the front of the month. Maybe even more important, because it's your last chance to create some revenue before the end of the month.
Right. But presumably, for example, in that case, if somebody knows that their free time is at the end of the month, you could have a calendar at the top of the page that people can click on, so that they could jump straight to the day that they're interested in and see what, So, and I think as well with a calendar, there's a sort of logical sequence. So the visitor is going to know that as they scroll down, they're going to get further into the month. They can see that at least, so they know if they're interested in a particular date. Whereas if your content is just random lists of things, they're not going to have that, oh, well, I know what I'm going to get as I go down.
Yeah. Now, when Google Analytics 4 first came out, we had a session during our casino marketing bootcamp, and the person that led the session asked everybody what the top 3 metrics they looked at on their website. And for the most part, it was visits, page views, and I can't remember what the third one was, but we had this big conversation about how those metrics are great, but those metrics aren't really telling us anything about the business. And so tracking things like player card signups and hotel reservations, or people clicking for more information on a particular concert or promotion, can tell you more about how your content is impacting the business.
Right, absolutely. And look, if you can have all the visitors in the world, and if they don't do what you want them to do, then it's all a waste of time, right? So one of the things that it's really important for the business owners to understand is what they want to happen on the website. So that means you have to have a clear idea of what all your outcomes are that you want. And obviously there are big outcomes like bookings, reservations, or I guess if you have online, I don't know if your members actually have online games as well. But there are also sort of we call them micro conversions, smaller goals maybe that are still important, right? Like looking at the promotions page, right? At least that means that somebody's interested enough to take a look. So what you're looking for is not just visitors, but the quality of those visitors, because then you want to say, okay, where did those visitors come from? Then you can tie that back to your marketing, and you can say, what are all the different ways that I'm getting traffic to this site? So that might be that you already have an email list, you have a loyalty club, maybe, where you email to those people, special offers. You're in search engines, you're presumably in local search for people that want to do casino near me searches, right? Maybe you're doing some social media, and you want to know which of those, especially the ones you're spending money on, obviously, are paying off for you. And, for example, on social media, there are times when I see that people pay a lot for social media ads, but they don't necessarily produce the best traffic. And one of the nice things about analytics, if you haven't seen this, is that you can split all of your traffic into how did they get here? Little groups, or big groups, hopefully, right? And then you can compare which of these different types ways to get people actually gives me the best visitors. And without knowing or seeing any of your sites, like, the usual bet is your own list, your own email lists, and are your absolute number one, because those are people that already know and love you, right? And often after that, search is the next one, because again, people are proactively looking for a casino, as opposed to somebody who sees an ad when they may not have been in that until that instant thinking about going to a casino.
So I was talking to a casino marketer just this week, and I was telling her my favorite report, if there's such thing as having a favorite Google Analytics report, is the sources medium report, because it gives
Right.
me insight into what I'm doing and what the effect is.
But see, that's what I'm saying. You want to marry that report with your outcomes. So you go through your entire website and you're really clear about what are the things I'm looking to happen, whether it's a sign up or a booking
Right.
or a download of a particular, or looking at a particular page, whatever it is, reading the blog, right? Watching a video. And then you can relate your traffic sources to those outcomes, because you want to take it all the way through. Which of these visitors are the most likely to actually do what I want them to do?
That's a great tip. We talked earlier when we were having our pre-production call about how small operators are a lot like small business owners. Can you tell us how they can approach analytics knowing that they're not data scientists?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, I know I sound like I keep saying this, but you've got to know what you want to happen. And it's not, what you don't want to do is just measure tons and tons of things for the sake of it, because they're just numbers. And they're honestly not real numbers. It's something that people have to really understand, because of, cookie blocking and people saying they don't want to be tracked and so on. Whatever the number of visitors it says you had is, you almost certainly had more. Because people aren't being tracked. Some people will not be tracked. Some browsers will automatically block tracking. People have ad blockers and so on, right? So it's really important to understand that these are not real numbers. And you should never take your analytics as a sort of tool of record. So your real numbers for bookings and things like that are in your own back-end systems, right?
Right.
What you're looking for in the analytics is trends and patterns. So it's important to understand that, right? I mean, that's why it's worth it. It's not worth it to know. You can't say this is exactly how many visitors my website had. It's never going to tell you that. And so the thing to do, as I'm saying, is to decide, what are the important outcomes that you want on your site? Where are you asking for them? How are you asking for them? What kind of content are you putting effort into? Are you making videos? Are you asking visitors for testimonials, and are even having little video vignettes of visitors, if they're willing to do that, because that's the sort of social proof that can often be really helpful. But then if you have video on your website, for example, the question is, do people watch it? So, and again, you can tell that, and you can tell not only if people start the video, but you can also make sure that it will tell you how many people actually watch the whole thing. So what you're looking for is, what's important to me about this website? What have I put effort into? And I need to know if it's paying off. So you need to understand your own site, which obviously as a business owner, you should do. And right now, I'm not talking about analytics, because you can go to an analyst and say, okay, these are the things that I'm looking for. These are the people that I want, and have the analyst tell you if that's happening. But the analyst can't tell you what you want.
Well, you said to me, you don't need to learn the interface. You need to learn how to think about your website strategically.
That's my opinion. It's my it's the basis of my book, because my book is trying to help people understand what we're talking about now, which is what does the business owner need to know in order to run the business better from the website perspective, as opposed to how to do analytics. And I actually have an analogy that I like to say. I remember years ago when you used to actually sit with your accountant. Remember when you used to actually go and see your accountant? And my accountant was doing my tax return, and he couldn't make it reconcile, and he didn't know what was going on, and he spent like 10 minutes or so until he finally got it. And being an accountant, he was all excited, and he said, wow, now it's working, now it's right. Would you like to know what I found? And I said, no. Just tell me if I owe anything, right? Because I don't want to know that mechanic. I just want the bottom line.
Like,
You can be a business owner with your website analytics in the same position as long as you've got an analyst you trust. But the point is, you need to know what you need to know.
so what do you think the questions that casino marketers or the general manager should be asking about the website?
So it's really about, are the things that we want to happen happening, and if not, why not? So is it because, and that's when you have to start digging in and saying, well, because the analytics aren't going to tell you the why, they're going to tell you the what's happening. So supposing we've got some sort of a booking form and nobody's using it. Why? So A, are people even finding the form? I mean, it could be something really basic. It's buried and nobody sees it. B, it could be the form's broken, something else that's really, really basic,
Yes.
right? C, it could be that for some reason the form is too long. One of the things you can do is, again, to have the analytics tell you when somebody starts filling in the form, because then you know how many people started filling in the form as opposed to how many people finished filling in the form.
And
And
that
if
could be really valuable with card signups or hotel bookings.
right. And if they don't finish filling in the form, there's something that's putting them off about the form. Now, for a hotel booking, obviously, there's some pretty standard information that you need to know. But for other types of forms, like interest forms, we see examples where people are asking things that people find too intrusive, or you're asking me, you want me to sign up for your promotions list because you want me on your email, but maybe you're asking me too early in the process and you're looking sort of desperate.
Or you're asking for a lot more information. If you're just signing up for a newsletter, why do I have to give you my home address also and my birthday and everything else? I think that
Exactly.
we've had conversations with others that say, once you get that little bit of information and you start creating a relationship, you can start asking for little bits more and start to build out that profile of that customer.
Absolutely. And the problem is it's really easy to put people off. And so the thing is, if you're the business owner, you can see how many form submissions you get, how many you actually come through. But this allows you to see, well, did that represent the vast majority of people who saw that form, or actually is it very few of them? Because now I know I've got a problem and I need to take a look at that form and try and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
So I just keep coming back to the goal is, you've got to know what you need to happen, and then you can find out if that's happening. And then, as I said, you can relate that back to, well, if it's not happening, it could also be, am I getting the wrong type of visitor?
Right.
You can tell where visitors come from. And obviously, if they're from outside your area, are you doing too much advertising that isn't sufficiently targeted geographically?
Or is your language showing up in searches that aren't targeted geographically?
Right, right. Yeah. And again, content that's buried, are they simply not seeing stuff? Right? Are they not watching? You've got a video and you've got this amazing offer that's like 3/4 of the way through the video. And the thing about video, like for YouTube itself will tell you how many people watch the video, but those numbers can be misleading, because that fires, I think, if the person has been watching the video for something like 30 seconds.
Right.
But it doesn't tell you beyond that, right? So if somebody drops off at 31 seconds, and your offer is at 45 seconds, they haven't seen it.
Right.
So it's really, you're getting really granular, but you have the opportunity to do all these things that really tell you what's going on with everything on your website that's important in terms of either getting actual direct revenue, or building the trust and the relationship along the way that leads to ultimate revenue.
You sort of have to understand what happens next and what's important and what's not in that next phase.
Right. And the important thing to understand is that all these things are possible. Sometimes they do require additional programming. So a program like Google Analytics, and obviously there are other programs too, will do certain things out of the box by default, but typically they won't do some of the things that can really customize to your specific business. But again, and you can try to do that yourself. It can get a little complicated, but again, you can get somebody to do that for you, as long as you know what you want to do. And obviously, when I'm saying, you shouldn't be expected to know all the capabilities of analytics, but you should be able to know the questions that you have about your website.
Okay, before we wrap up, I would to ask you what you think quick wins are for marketers that have limited times and limited teams. Like, what are the simple things that they can do with their Google Analytics that would give them some quick wins?
So, and by the way, there's another program that I use a lot, which is in conjunction with Google Analytics, which is, I personally really like the heat map that's Microsoft Clarity.
I just started using that.
Right. And you can integrate it with Google
Yeah.
Analytics, which is really nice, so that you can take advantage of some of the power of Google with this. And this is where you can actually record exactly what people do on a page, and you get screen recordings. So you can see where they go and
Yes.
where they hover, and that can be really helpful too. So, if I was starting out, I would do, really simple things like we talked about the scrolling. I really think, based on the sites that I'm seeing, that that's something that people should really look at.
Okay.
Have you got important content that you're missing because nobody's scrolling that far? How far people are moving through the site, and again, often, people will come to the home page or your landing page if you're doing advertising. If everything that they should see is on that page, that's fine. But if you want them to go to other pages, is that happening? And again, a lot of the time now, I still see a lot of times when people get to one page, they may look at that page. I'm not talking about leaving immediately, but the site isn't doing a good enough job of driving them into other pages if that's important. And
So
just one more, just looking again at, as we said earlier, at your traffic sources. And again, I
Yes.
would really do this. If you're spending money on advertising, and especially social media advertising, make sure that that is actually paying off and worth it for you by correlating those visitors who come from those sources with the outcomes that you get from them, whether they're booking or doing whatever else you want them to do. Make sure that advertising is worth doing in the way that you're doing it.
I think it's also important to take a look at your top pages and understand whether they're actually aligning with the goals that you have for the site,
Right.
or if it's just another digital brochure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Philippa, thank you so much for joining us. Now, you do have a new book, but tell us how people can get a hold of you if they've got more questions, and where you're at on social.
I'm on LinkedIn, so LinkedIn is my absolute favorite. I tend to really spend most of my time there, and my website is websitesthatwin.com, and my book is called Website Wealth, which is a great title for casino owners. And if you can find it on Amazon and hopefully shortly at all good bookstores. So, yes.
Well, again, Philippa, thank you for joining me and for sharing such practical and eye-opening advice. I still think Google Analytics is strange land for a lot of casino marketers. And I know our listeners now have a clearer idea of how to make their websites actually work, or at least think about how to make them work for their businesses and not just look good on a dashboard.
Great, thank you.
And to all of you listening or watching, thank you for tuning in. If something Philippa said today sparked an idea, challenged your thinking, or gave you an aha moment, I'd love to hear about it. You can find me on all the socials, but like Philippa, mostly on LinkedIn. If your website could use a little more strategy and a little less guesswork, check out Philippa's new book. I'm going to drop a link in the show notes for you. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, give us a rating and a review and tell your friends about it. But until next time, keep doing the work, keep asking questions, and keep betting on smarter marketing. And yes, I did say betting on smarter marketing. Thank you.